Welcome to this episode of UXD, where we will highlight one of the 3 commonly missed opportunities for applications to deliver delight to their users. This is the third and last part of the 3 Steps to Awesome series. I'm your host, Nazmul Idris, a developer advocate passionate about design and mobile, and I have with me a very special guest.
Thanks, Nazmul. I'm Patrick Larvey. I'm a UX researcher here at Google. I've been working on mobile for years, and I have lots to say.
Awesome. So make sure to create applications that are actually useful and add value to people's lives. So before thinking about the best interaction design or the best visual design for your application or even the best engineering or the best feature set, it's really important to first validate your assumptions about whether users actually need your app in the first place. It sounds kind of crazy, but you really have to validate that assumption first and set the goals correctly. So build applications that people actually want to use, and then delight them with an amazing user experience.
Getting the details of that right is going to be a different series, but I think that we can start here with some real basics about that you can use to make sure that this is true. And the first thing to remember is usability really is job one for every app developer out there. Some of these things are going to sound super basic, and you're going to say, well, these are things I already do, but just check. Just make sure that you're thinking about this. The first thing I want you to think about is, what are the physical constraints and what are the physical possibilities of the form factor I'm designing for? Tablet, phone, what is it that you're designing for? These are not similar. They are both different from laptops. They're both devices that live with app-based ecosystems. That doesn't mean they're the same. Think about some of the very first tablet-like devices that came out. The Kindle. These are optimized for reading. They look very much like books. And in fact, we know that this is why people are buying these tablets. They enjoy reading books, they enjoy reading magazines, they enjoy reading all kinds of content. That's not necessarily true for mobile phones. You can read a novel on a smartphone. You're not going to be reading that novel on your mobile phone. And this is one of the subtle but really, really important differences that you need to understand about form factor. Think not just about how users interact with what they see on a screen, but you can also think about how information gets to the device and comes back out of the device. Text-to-speech and voice input are really important to think about. They're really novel ways of interacting with a mobile phone. If you're not familiar with it, familiarize yourself with Google Now. It has some awesome examples of how, with a mobile device, a kind of device people are often using while they're doing other kinds of things, you can say, how long is the Golden Gate Bridge, as you're perhaps pedaling across it, and it will speak back to you and say it is, I'm not sure, a mile and a half or whatever it is long.
Yeah.
So this is a novel but entirely appropriate way of using text-to-speech and voice input on a device like that. May not be the best thing to use on a tablet. It depends a lot on the situation, but the form factor between these two kinds of devices has vast implications that often people are not thinking through. Do not attempt to just reuse smartphone applications for tablets. It's a fundamental mistake.
Yeah, exactly. I think to your point of the difference in usage between smartphones and tablets, on the go on mobile devices like smartphones, people have really, really limited attention to devote to these particular devices because they're also taking in their environment and so on. So it's not appropriate to make big demands of their attention while they're on the go and using your application. Whereas in a tablet, maybe you're at home, the context is very different, and so you can then optimize things more for content consumption rather than content creation or even things that you need to do, tasks that you need to execute on.
That's right. This is a really good point. There are lots of studies that show that the smartest, most switched-on user who really wants to interact with your app has a more limited attention span and has just basically less memory to use when using a mobile phone than when using other kinds of devices. Keep this in mind. It's not that the user is different, it's that the device imposes this difference. When you've got a mobile phone, you're also attending to the environment, you're attending to lots of different things. This reduces the amount of attention, this reduces the amount of brain power a person can bring to whatever app they're using. So this is really important to think about because I know a lot of you have heard or are thinking about or are currently using responsive design. And responsive design is a fantastic engineering fix, but do not think of it as a design solution because it is not. Just because you can take that novel and put it on a mobile phone doesn't mean you should. Do not just reflow web pages on a mobile because you can use responsive design. Going back to that novel, think about it. On a mobile phone with a person's reduced ability to attend, a person's reduced attention span, a person's reduced memory, the table of contents is going to work really well. Something where you're going to select between several options and you go to some other kind of content. The novel, the inside of a chapter, completely inappropriate. So just because you can put lots of text on a phone does not mean you have, the responsive design does not in any way optimize text for mobile devices. It simply puts that text on mobile devices. That is the beginning of your job, it's not the end.
Exactly.
I think one thing, I want to talk a little bit about cowboy design. Lots of people like to leave their signature. Lots of people like to have a strong brand presence. It is a wild, wild west out there with app design. Lots of you know this. You've had lots of apps that you look at and you say, wow, I have absolutely no idea what this is or what it does. This is not a way of making your user feel welcome because your user is not going to feel in control. They're not going to feel like they understand what's going on. The reason for conventions, for platform conventions, isn't just to straitjacket everybody into a series of design patterns that otherwise make no sense. The point is to make everybody feel comfortable, everybody feel in charge of what they're doing. Learn and internalize those design guidelines. You sometimes have to deviate, as we've said in the other episodes. Sometimes you have to deviate. You should do so purposefully and thoughtfully. If you're not sure how to approach this, find a coder buddy and go through the guidelines until you thoroughly understand them. Remember that users expect objects to behave in a certain way, and there's absolutely no reason to confuse or befuddle your user. And when you're going to deviate, do so, but do so in a very thoughtful and purposeful way. The other thing I just want to say about apps is that you want to know about location. And generally when app designers think about location, they think GPS.
Right.
I want you to think about internal location. Does the user know where he or she is within your app? Am I on the home page? Am I on a content page? Where am I? Where can I go from here? Where can I go next? And what will I do there? This is actually a fundamental heuristic, and you can and should be applying it to walkthroughs of your app before it gets released.
That makes sense.
And I know a lot of you out there already know this. This is super, super basic, but it's surprising how many people fail to attend to this fundamental, super basic aspect of design. Please be sensitive to the 48-dip minimum touch target size when building anything on a mobile device. And by the way, that 48-dip, that's for the actual touch target. You need a buffer zone around that touch target as well, because you can't see it out there in video land, but my fingers are kind of big, and if you don't have an appropriate buffer around or you need a zone around those tap targets to keep your user from inadvertently touching the wrong thing.
Exactly. So I think along these lines of touch targets, Prototype on Paper is a really good application for Android and iPhone that I encourage you guys to use. You can basically take pictures with your camera of actual screenshots or basically wireframes or anything that you're drawing on paper. You can essentially just take pictures of them and then wire them together and then create a flow that allows you to interact with different parts of those scanned images. So it's a really, really good way to test out your design, make sure that you've gotten some of these touch targets right before you actually do the expensive part of actually prototyping it and developing it. So I hope you enjoyed our episode today. Just remember, by following our 3 steps, you too can avoid common pitfalls and make awesome applications. Also, if you haven't already, please join our UX community on Google+, where we curate information about all things that are related to UX.
What's it called? What's the community called?
It's called UX Design for Developers.
Wow. Okay.
And the QR code is actually on the screen, along with a link for it. So thank you, Patrick, for being on the show.
Thank you, Nazmal, for having me.
Thanks for watching. Join us next time, and goodbye.